You don't lack confidence. That explanation is convenient. It's familiar. It sounds incomplete in a way that invites patience. As if confidence is something that simply hasn't arrived yet, as if it's late, as if it got lost. But if you listen closely, that explanation has been with you for a long time, long enough to feel stable, long enough to feel like part of who you are. And stability is rarely accidental. Doubt, on the other hand, has been consistent. It has shown up on time. It has followed you through different phases of your life, different ambitions, different versions of yourself. It adjusted when things changed. It refined its arguments. It matured alongside you. That kind of loyalty doesn't come from absence. It comes from choice. You call it insecurity. You call it self-criticism. You call it caution. You call it realism. But doubt isn't something that keeps interrupting your life. It's something you return to. You consult it. You trust it. You let it speak first. And when it does, it sounds reasonable, measured, thoughtful, protective. It doesn't scream. It doesn't panic. It explains. Doubt has learned how to justify itself in your voice. That's why it doesn't feel like an enemy. It feels like judgment, like discernment, like intelligence. It feels like you being careful, and careful feels virtuous. Confidence, by contrast, feels irresponsible, not because it's loud, not because it's arrogant, but because it doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait until every variable is known. It doesn't guarantee safety. Confidence makes a claim before it earns the right to. It moves without consensus, and that feels like betrayal. Not of logic, but of identity. You've spent years constructing a version of yourself that survives by anticipating failure. Someone who sees problems early, who notices flaws, who prepares for disappointment. That version kept you coherent. It kept you socially acceptable. It kept you from being humiliated in obvious ways. It learned to say, let's not get ahead of ourselves. And people rewarded that. They called you grounded, thoughtful, self-aware. They trusted your restraint. They trusted your doubt. Over time, doubt stopped being a reaction. It became a role, a position you occupy in every situation before anything else has a chance. You don't wait to see if confidence fits. You assume it doesn't. You preemptively disqualify yourself to avoid the shock of being disqualified later. That feels like control. It feels like dignity. It feels safer to lower your own expectations than to have them lowered for you. So confidence never gets a chance to fail. It never gets tested. It never gets to be wrong. Because you don't allow it to exist long enough to prove anything. You dismiss it as naive, as premature, as not fully thought through. You say, I'm just being honest with myself. But honesty can be selective, and yours has been loyal to doubt. Notice how doubt organizes your time, how it delays decisions, how it reframes desire as impractical, how it converts longing into analysis. You don't say you don't want certain things. You say, now isn't the right moment. I need to be realistic. I don't think that's who I am. Doubt doesn't forbid. It postpones, indefinitely. That's why it doesn't feel oppressive. It doesn't lock doors. It builds waiting rooms. Rooms where you feel reasonable. Rooms where nothing demands a verdict. Rooms where life feels paused, but never officially abandoned. And as long as things are paused, nothing can be lost. Confidence would require a stance, not a guarantee, a stance. A willingness to be seen as someone who believes something before proof arrives. And belief exposes you. It creates a surface others can judge. Doubt keeps you complex, unfinished, hard to evaluate. As long as you're undecided, No one can fully measure you, not even you. There's a subtle pride in that, in being the one who sees both sides, who remains unconvinced, who refuses to simplify. You don't trust people who are too certain. You've learned to associate confidence with blindness, so you distance yourself from it. You position yourself as the one who knows better than to commit too fully to anything. That distance feels intelligent, but it also keeps you intact, untouched. Doubt protects you from becoming a clear target. If you never fully stand somewhere, nothing can strike you directly. Criticism slides off, failure stays hypothetical, regret remains abstract. Confidence would make things concrete. It would collapse possibilities into a single direction, and direction eliminates alibis. Ask yourself something quietly. When was the last time doubt surprised you? When did it tell you something new? Most of the time, it repeats familiar arguments. It uses old evidence, old fears, old conclusions. But because they're yours, they sound authoritative. You've heard them so many times they feel earned. But repetition isn't depth, it's reinforcement. Confidence doesn't feel dangerous because it's false. It feels dangerous because it would disrupt the internal balance you've been maintaining. Your doubt keeps different parts of you in agreement. Your ambition stays contained. Your disappointment stays theoretical. Your self-image stays consistent. Confidence would renegotiate all of that. It would force your ambition to speak louder. It would make disappointment possible. It would risk rewriting who you are. That's not a small cost. So, doubt stays. Not because it's stronger, but because it's loyal. You've built a self-concept around being the one who hesitates for good reasons, the one who doesn't rush, the one who waits until things make sense. That identity is stable, socially legible, internally familiar. Letting go of doubt wouldn't just change how you act, it would change how you explain yourself. And explanations matter. They're how you stay intelligible to others. They're how you stay intelligible to yourself. Notice how quickly you defend your doubt. If someone challenges it, you don't feel curious, you feel misunderstood. You clarify, you justify, you add context. You want them to see that your hesitation isn't weakness, it's thoughtfulness, it's depth, it's maturity. Confidence, by comparison, has no such defense. It doesn't explain itself well. It doesn't argue elegantly. It simply appears. And appearance without justification feels exposed, almost rude. So you mistrust it. There's another detail you may have noticed. Doubt rarely asks you to change your life. It asks you to manage it, to optimize, to refine, to adjust expectations. Confidence would ask you to reorganize, not externally, internally. It would demand you take yourself seriously before the evidence catches up. And taking yourself seriously is a risk, because if you do and nothing changes, there's no one left to blame. Doubt always leaves an escape route. If things don't work out, you can say you never fully believed anyway. You were realistic, cautious, measured. Confidence would remove that cushion. It would leave you exposed to your own sincerity. That's not failure, that's exposure, and exposure feels like loss of control. So, doubt remains. It keeps you coherent, it keeps your story intact, it lets you explain why things haven't happened without confronting the cost of that explanation. It gives you language instead of movement, interpretation instead of decision. And interpretation feels active, it feels like engagement. But nothing actually shifts. You don't lack confidence. If you did, you would feel empty, uncertain, disoriented. Instead, you feel composed, clear about your reasons, grounded in your hesitations. That's not absence, that's allegiance. Doubt has become part of how you recognize yourself. It's how you know you're being you. Without it, you might not know who you are. You might have to encounter parts of yourself that haven't been filtered, qualified, or moderated yet. That encounter wouldn't be catastrophic, but it would be unfamiliar. and unfamiliar is what you've been quietly avoiding. Confidence doesn't threaten your success, it threatens your continuity. It interrupts the narrative that has kept you understandable both to yourself and to others. It asks, what if you stopped qualifying your existence? And that question doesn't feel empowering, it feels destabilizing. So you stay loyal, not to doubt as a feeling, but to doubt as a structure that has kept your life coherent, predictable, contained. You don't attack it, you protect it. You call it honesty, you call it realism, but underneath, it's allegiance. And maybe the most uncomfortable part is this. If doubt weren't doing something important for you, you would have let it go by now. It's been challenged, exposed, analyzed. You've watched countless explanations about why it's limiting, and still it remains. Calm, convincing, familiar, like something that belongs. So when you say you want confidence, listen carefully to what follows. Listen to the conditions, the caveats, the timelines. Listen to how doubt immediately frames the request. It doesn't say no, it says not yet. And you agree. You always have. The question isn't when confidence will arrive, it's what would collapse if doubt stopped being the authority. What story would lose its coherence, what identity would lose its protection, and whether you're willing to be unfamiliar to yourself without immediately replacing that discomfort with explanation. Because doubt isn't just something you have, it's something you've been faithful to, and loyalty is hard to break when it's kept you intact for this long.